The crack of a gunshot echoed through the crisp Montana morning air as Gabriel Vaughn steadied his rifle, watching the jackrabbit dart away unharmed. He cursed under his breath, lowering the weapon with a sigh. At 32, he'd mastered many skills needed for survival in the untamed frontier of Black Hawk, Montana. But lately, his mind wandered too often for precise shooting. The year was 1872, and Gabriel had spent the past 8 years building his ranch into something substantial, something worth sharing, perhaps with a wife. His boots crunched on the frost-covered ground as he made his way back to his cabin. The 2-story wooden structure stood proudly against the backdrop of the distant Rocky Mountains, a testament to years of hard work. Inside, he placed his rifle in the rack and moved to his desk, where the letter that would change his life lay waiting. "Mr. Gabriel Vaughn," it read in delicate penmanship, "I am writing in response to your advertisement. My name is Eleanor Porter, age 26. I believe I possess the qualities you seek in a wife: determination, resourcefulness, and a willingness to embrace life in the West. However, I must be forthright. My mother, Margaret, who is 63 years of age, must accompany me. She is my only family, and I could not bear to leave her behind. She is skilled in many household matters and would contribute to your home. If this arrangement is acceptable to you, please respond with details for our journey. Sincerely, Eleanor Porter." Gabriel ran his fingers through his dark hair, contemplating the unexpected stipulation. He had advertised for a bride, not 2 women. Yet something about Eleanor's loyalty to her mother touched him. His own mother had died when he was just a boy, and he often wondered how different life might have been had she lived longer. After several days of consideration, Gabriel posted his reply, agreeing to the arrangement and sending train tickets for the journey from Boston to the closest station in Helena. Now, 3 months later, he stood on the platform, watching the train pull into the station with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The locomotive hissed to a stop, belching steam into the cool April air. Gabriel straightened his freshly pressed shirt and adjusted his hat, scanning the disembarking passengers. His heart quickened as 2 women descended from the passenger car, one tall and slender, perhaps in her 20s, and the other considerably older, moving with careful steps while leaning on a wooden cane. "Mr. Vaughn," the younger woman called, spotting his searching gaze. Gabriel approached, removing his hat. "Miss Porter." Eleanor Porter was even more striking than he had imagined. Her auburn hair was neatly pinned beneath a modest traveling hat, and her green eyes held both intelligence and caution. "Yes, and this is my mother, Margaret Porter." The older woman offered a tired but dignified smile. "Mr. Vaughn, thank you for your generosity in accepting both of us." Gabriel nodded, suddenly tongue-tied in the presence of his future wife. "The pleasure is mine, madam, and please call me Gabriel." He turned to Eleanor, finding his voice again. "Both of you, in fact. Then you must call me Eleanor," she replied, her voice carrying the refined tones of her Eastern upbringing. Gabriel helped collect their trunks, loading them onto his wagon. He noticed how Eleanor supported her mother's elbow as they walked, guiding her with gentle patience. The older woman moved slowly but with determination, refusing Eleanor's offer to carry her smaller bag. "Mother insists on managing what she can," Eleanor explained quietly to Gabriel as they reached the wagon. "Her independence means everything to her." Gabriel nodded, understanding. "My father was the same way before he passed, stubborn as a mule, right to the end." The journey from Helena to Black Hawk took nearly 5 hours. Initially, conversation was stiff and formal as they traversed the rutted dirt roads. Gabriel pointed out landmarks along the way: the distant mountain peaks, a herd of pronghorn antelope grazing on a hillside, the creek that ran through his property. "What made you decide to answer my advertisement, Eleanor?" Gabriel finally asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Eleanor exchanged a glance with her mother before answering. "After my father died last year, we struggled to maintain our home in Boston. The cost of living became prohibitive, and my position as a schoolteacher didn't provide enough." She paused, absently adjusting her gloves. "I saw your advertisement in the newspaper and thought perhaps a fresh start would benefit us both, mother and me, that is." "She's being modest," Margaret interjected. Eleanor had several suitors in Boston, but none offered security or seemed to value her mind. The older woman's voice carried a hint of pride. "My daughter graduated from a women's college, Mr. Vaughn. She's quite educated." Gabriel raised his eyebrows. "Is that so? Well, we've got a small schoolhouse in town that hasn't had a proper teacher in over a year. The children make do with Mrs. Holbrook, the preacher's wife, but she's got 5 young ones of her own." Eleanor's eyes brightened. "You think I might teach here?" "I don't see why not. Town's growing every year. Railroads bringing more families." Gabriel clicked his tongue, urging the horses forward as they began ascending a gentle slope. "Course, there'd be ranch work too. Life here isn't easy." "We don't expect easy," Eleanor assured him. "We expect honest." As the wagon crested the hill, Gabriel's ranch came into view, a sprawling property nestled in a verdant valley. The main house stood proudly, with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings nearby. A small creek wound through the property, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. "That's Silverwater Ranch," Gabriel announced with unmistakable pride. "Been working it 8 years now. Started with just 20 acres and that cabin." He pointed to a small structure near the creek. "Now up to 300 acres. Got 60 head of cattle, 8 horses, and some chickens." Eleanor's eyes widened as she took in the vista. Even Margaret straightened in her seat, taking in the beauty of the landscape. "It's lovely," Eleanor said softly. "Truly beautiful." Gabriel felt a surprising flush of pleasure at her approval. "It gets cold in winter and summers can be dry, but spring and fall make up for it." He flicked the reins, guiding the wagon down toward the homestead. "I built the main house 3 years ago. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms. Figured I'd need the space someday." As they approached, a large black and white dog came bounding toward the wagon, barking excitedly. "That's Ranger," Gabriel explained. "Best cattle dog in the territory and a good guard, too. Don't worry, he's friendly." True to Gabriel's word, once the wagon stopped, Ranger circled it eagerly, tail wagging as he inspected the newcomers. Eleanor reached down cautiously to pat his head, earning an enthusiastic lick of her hand. "He approves," Gabriel said with a smile, the first real one since meeting them. Gabriel helped Margaret down first, noticing how she winced slightly as her feet touched the ground. The long journey had clearly taken a toll on her. "Eleanor mentioned in her letters that you suffer from rheumatism," Gabriel said, offering his arm for support. "I had the hands build a rocking chair with extra cushions for the porch. Thought you might enjoy watching the sunset from there." Margaret looked surprised, then touched by the thoughtfulness. "That was very kind, Mr. Vaughn." "Gabriel," he reminded her gently, "and it's nothing. My grandmother had similar troubles. Found the mountain air helped some, though the winters were hard on her joints." Eleanor watched this exchange with quiet assessment, something softening in her expression. This man was not what she had expected. His letters had been practical, almost businesslike, but in person, Gabriel Vaughn revealed glimpses of genuine consideration. Gabriel showed them around the house, a solidly built structure with a large kitchen, a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, and upstairs bedrooms that offered views of the surrounding landscape. The furniture was simple but well crafted, much of it made by Gabriel's own hands. "This will be your room, Mrs. Porter," Gabriel said, showing Margaret to a bedroom on the first floor. "Figured stairs might be troublesome. There's a washroom just through that door." "You've thought of everything," Margaret said, sinking gratefully onto the bed. "And Eleanor, you can have this room for now," Gabriel continued, leading her to a bedroom upstairs. An uncomfortable silence fell between them at the implication of his words "for now," until they married and would share a room. "When do you propose we should wed?" Eleanor asked directly, her cheeks coloring slightly despite her forthright manner. Gabriel cleared his throat. "Well, Preacher Holbrook comes through town every other Sunday. That's in 4 days. But I don't want to rush you. We could wait until you're more settled if you prefer." Eleanor considered this. "I think it would be best to honor our agreement promptly, but perhaps we could use these days to become better acquainted." Gabriel nodded, relieved by her practical approach. "That seems sensible." The first evening passed with a simple meal. Gabriel had prepared a stew that had been simmering all day while he was at the station. Despite his initial nervousness, conversation flowed more easily than expected. Margaret shared stories of Boston, while Gabriel described the challenges and rewards of ranching. Eleanor spoke little but observed much, noting Gabriel's mannerisms and how he listened attentively when either of them spoke. After dinner, as Margaret retired early, exhausted from the journey, Eleanor helped Gabriel clean up. "Your mother seems in good spirits despite the long trip," Gabriel observed, drying a plate Eleanor had washed. "She's stronger than she appears," Eleanor replied. "Though I worry the journey has aggravated her condition. I've arranged for Doc Wilson to visit tomorrow. He's a good physician, trained back east before the war." Eleanor paused in her washing. "That's thoughtful of you," Gabriel shrugged. "Seemed the proper thing to do." "May I ask you something, Gabriel?" When he nodded, she continued, "Why did you agree to bring my mother? Most men seeking mail-order brides wouldn't welcome such an arrangement." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I know what it's like to lose family. My mother died when I was 8. Father raised me alone until he passed 10 years ago. Family's not something to discard lightly." He placed the dried plate on the shelf. "Besides, this house has been too quiet for too long." Eleanor's eyes met his, searching for signs of insincerity but finding none. "Thank you," she said simply. The following days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Gabriel rose early to attend to ranch duties, while Eleanor explored the house and surroundings, quickly identifying ways to improve the bachelor household. Margaret, after receiving a tonic from Doc Wilson, spent mornings resting and afternoons sitting in her special rocking chair, observing the activities of the ranch. On the second day, Eleanor surprised Gabriel by joining him in the barn as he repaired a broken wagon wheel. "Is there something I can help with?" she asked, standing in the doorway. Gabriel looked up, hammer in hand. "You don't need to concern yourself with the heavy work." "I didn't come west to sit idle," Eleanor replied firmly. "I need to learn the workings of this ranch if I'm to be your wife." Gabriel studied her determined expression and nodded. "All right then. Let me show you around properly." Throughout the day, Gabriel explained the operation of the ranch, the cattle breeding program he was developing, the irrigation system for the hay fields, the chores that needed daily attention. Eleanor listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her quick mind. "You've built something impressive here," she acknowledged as they walked back to the house for the midday meal. "It's not much compared to the big outfits," Gabriel replied modestly. "But it's yours," Eleanor observed, "built with your own hands and vision." Gabriel glanced at her, surprised by her understanding. "Yes, exactly that. During lunch, Margaret announced she had made a discovery. "There's a patch of land behind the house that would make an excellent kitchen garden," she said. "If you don't object, Gabriel, I could plan one out. I was known for my vegetables in Boston." "I'd welcome it," Gabriel replied. "Been meaning to start one for years, but never found the time." That afternoon, Gabriel took time from his usual duties to help Margaret survey the potential garden site. The older woman's knowledge impressed him as she assessed soil conditions and sun exposure, planning where each vegetable should be planted. "The soil here is richer than I expected," Margaret noted, rubbing the dark earth between her fingers. "With proper care, we could grow enough to see us through winter, with extra to preserve." "I'll have the hands clear the space and build you raised beds," Gabriel offered. "Might make tending it easier on your joints." Margaret looked at him with appreciation. "You're a thoughtful man, Gabriel Vaughn. Just practical, madam." "Margaret," she corrected with a smile. "We're to be family soon." As the wedding day approached, Eleanor found herself increasingly comfortable in Gabriel's presence. His quiet strength and straightforward manner appealed to her more than she had anticipated. She had entered this arrangement out of necessity, expecting at best a respectful partnership. She hadn't expected to find herself watching for his return when he rode out to check the herd, or to feel a flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched. The night before the wedding, Eleanor sat with her mother on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Are you certain about tomorrow, Eleanor?" Margaret asked softly. "It's not too late to change your mind." Eleanor considered the question seriously. "I am," she finally answered. "He's a good man, Mother, better than I dared hope for." "Yes," Margaret agreed, "but do you think you could love him? That matters, you know." Eleanor watched Gabriel in the distance, closing the chicken coop for the night. "I think perhaps I already do a little," she admitted. "Not the grand passion of novels, but something that could grow strong with time." Margaret patted her daughter's hand. "That's often the best kind." Inside the house, Gabriel was having similar thoughts as he polished his best boots for the ceremony. Eleanor Porter was nothing like he'd imagined when placing his advertisement. She was educated, refined, yet unafraid of hard work. He found himself admiring her resilience and the loving care she showed her mother. More than that, he enjoyed her company, her insights, her occasional dry humor, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled. The wedding took place in Black Hawk's small church, a simple wooden structure that served the growing community. Though they had only been in town a few days, several neighbors attended, curious about the rancher's Eastern bride. Eleanor wore her best dress, blue silk with modest lace trim, while Gabriel donned a dark suit he rarely had occasion to wear. As they exchanged vows before Preacher Holbrook, Gabriel's voice remained steady, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. For her part, Eleanor spoke clearly and confidently, though her hand trembled slightly in Gabriel's grasp. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Gabriel hesitated, aware of the watching eyes. Then, gently, he leaned forward and placed a chaste kiss on Eleanor's lips. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through both of them, and when Gabriel pulled away, something new and unspoken passed between them. The small reception that followed at the town's only hotel was a cheerful affair. The townspeople welcomed Eleanor and Margaret warmly, particularly the town's women, who were delighted to have new female companions in the predominantly male settlement. "You've got yourself a fine wife, Gabe," declared Benjamin Harris, the town's blacksmith. "And her mother seems a treasure too. Smart move, bringing in two capable women at once." Gabriel smiled, watching Eleanor across the room as she chatted with the schoolchildren who had come with their parents. I'm a fortunate man, he agreed, and meant it. The journey back to the ranch that evening was quiet, all three lost in their thoughts about the day's events and what lay ahead. As Gabriel helped his new mother-in-law down from the wagon, Margaret squeezed his arm. "I'll retire early," she announced with meaningful emphasis. "It's been quite an eventful day." Left alone, the newlyweds moved awkwardly around each other, the reality of their new status suddenly immediate and daunting. "Would you like tea?" Eleanor offered, moving toward the kitchen. "That would be nice," Gabriel replied, grateful for the momentary reprieve. As Eleanor busied herself with the kettle, Gabriel built a fire in the sitting room, then stood watching the flames, gathering his courage. When Eleanor brought in the tea tray, he turned to her with determination. "Eleanor, I want you to know something," he said earnestly. "I don't expect. That is, I understand this marriage began as a practical arrangement. I won't pressure you for." He faltered, unaccustomed to discussing such personal matters. Eleanor set down the tray and faced him directly. "Are you saying you don't wish to consummate our marriage?" Gabriel's face reddened at her forthright question. "No, I mean, yes, I do, but only when you're ready. I want your trust first, your regard if possible." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "I agreed to be your wife in every sense, Gabriel, but I appreciate your consideration." She smiled slightly. "Perhaps we could simply begin by getting to know each other better, one day at a time." Gabriel covered her hand with his own. "I'd like that very much." That night, they shared Gabriel's bedroom, now their bedroom, but only in sleep, Gabriel keeping respectfully to his side of the bed. It was awkward at first, both lying stiffly beneath the quilts, but eventually exhaustion overcame discomfort, and they drifted off to the sound of each other's breathing. The following weeks brought a gradual adjustment to their new life together. Spring advanced across the land, bringing longer days and increasing warmth. Margaret's garden took shape, with neat rows of seedlings emerging from the carefully prepared soil. Eleanor divided her time between household management, learning ranch operations, and traveling into town twice a week to teach at the schoolhouse. Gabriel found himself appreciating the changes the women brought to his life. The house, once merely functional, became a home. Fresh curtains appeared at windows, wildflowers in jars brightened the table, and the aroma of home-cooked meals replaced the simple fare he had subsisted on for years. More than these physical improvements, though, he valued the conversation and companionship that now filled his evenings. Margaret, despite her physical limitations, proved an invaluable addition to the household. Her knowledge of medicinal herbs supplemented the doctor's occasional visits, and her skill at preserving foods would ensure well-stocked pantries for the winter ahead. She became a source of advice for neighboring farms about gardening in the Montana climate, earning respect in the community. One evening in late May, a violent thunderstorm swept across the valley. The rain came down in sheets, lightning splitting the sky as thunder shook the house. Gabriel had been out checking on a pregnant heifer when the storm hit, returning to the house soaked and chilled. "Gabriel, you're drenched," Eleanor exclaimed, hurrying to take his dripping coat. "Come sit by the fire. Mother, could you bring a towel?" Margaret was already headed toward them with a large towel and a steaming mug. "Drink this," she instructed, handing Gabriel the hot liquid. "It's willow bark tea with honey. Prevents chills." Gabriel accepted gratefully, sipping the bitter brew as Eleanor helped him remove his boots. Her touch was gentle yet efficient, her concern evident in the furrow of her brow. "The cattle?" she asked, knowing his worries. "Moved to higher ground," Gabriel assured her. "The creek's rising fast, but they should be safe." He looked at her kneeling before him. hair escaping from its pins after a long day's work, and felt a surge of tenderness. Without thinking, he reached out to tuck a stray strand behind her ear. Eleanor glanced up, surprised by the gesture. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a deepening of the connection that had been gradually forming. Later that night, as they lay in bed listening to the storm rage outside, Eleanor moved closer to Gabriel, resting her head against his shoulder. It was the first time she had initiated such contact. "Is this all right?" she asked softly. Gabriel's arm came around her, drawing her closer. "More than all right." In the gentle darkness, Eleanor found the courage to express what had been in her heart. "I didn't expect this, you know. When I answered your advertisement, I hoped for security, perhaps eventual companionship. I never imagined I would come to care for you as I do." Gabriel's breath caught. "And how is that, Eleanor?" She raised herself on one elbow, looking down at his face in the dim light. "I believe I'm falling in love with you, Gabriel Vaughn, rather unexpectedly." Gabriel's hand came up to caress her cheek. "I've been falling since the moment you stepped off that train, just been too afraid to admit it." Their lips met in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened, expressing the feelings that had been building between them. That night, they truly became husband and wife, discovering each other with tender curiosity and growing passion. As spring gave way to summer, the ranch flourished under the combined efforts of the expanded household. Gabriel hired 2 additional hands to help with the increasing workload, as he implemented breeding improvements that promised to strengthen his herd. Eleanor's teaching position became official when the town council voted to pay her a modest salary, recognizing the quality of education she provided. Margaret's garden produced an abundance of vegetables, and she began instructing Eleanor and several neighboring women in the art of canning and preserving. The older woman's health improved with the consistent Montana sunshine and the satisfaction of contributing meaningfully to their shared life. One hot July afternoon, Gabriel returned from town with a surprise: a small upright piano purchased from a family returning east. "It's not new," he apologized as the men maneuvered it into the sitting room, "and probably needs tuning." Eleanor stood speechless, her hand to her mouth. Music had been one of the pleasures she had reluctantly left behind in Boston. "How did you know?" she finally managed to ask. "Your mother mentioned you played," Gabriel explained. "Thought you might miss it." Eleanor sat at the instrument, running her fingers reverently over the keys. Despite its journey and age, the piano held its tune reasonably well. She began to play, a simple melody that filled the house with music for the first time. Gabriel watched, transfixed by the joy on his wife's face and the beauty of the music. Margaret appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound, her eyes glistening with tears of happiness for her daughter. That evening, after Margaret had retired, Eleanor found Gabriel on the porch, gazing at the stars that blanketed the clear Montana sky. "Thank you for the piano," she said, joining him on the bench. "It was incredibly thoughtful." Gabriel took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I want you to be happy here, Eleanor, not just content but truly happy." "I am," she assured him. "More than I ever thought possible." She leaned against him, comfortable now in showing affection. "I have something to tell you." Gabriel looked down at her, curious. "What is it?" "I visited Doc Wilson yesterday while in town," Eleanor said, a smile playing at her lips. "He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now. We're going to have a baby, Gabriel, early next year." Gabriel froze, processing her words. Then, with a whoop that startled the nearby chickens, he stood and lifted Eleanor into his arms, spinning her around on the porch. "Careful." She laughed. "The baby," he set her down immediately, his expression changing to concern. "Did I hurt you? Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," she assured him, placing his hand against her still flat stomach. "Our child is growing strong." Gabriel knelt before her, pressing his cheek against the place where their child developed. "A baby," he whispered in awe. "Our baby." The news of the pregnancy delighted Margaret, who immediately began knitting tiny garments and planning modifications to the nursery. Gabriel became even more protective of Eleanor, insisting she reduce her teaching hours and hiring a local girl to help with household chores. "I'm with child, not made of glass." Eleanor protested one afternoon when Gabriel forbade her from helping to mend a fence. "Indulge me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I've waited a lifetime for this family. I intend to treasure every moment." As autumn painted the landscape in rich golds and reds, the ranch prepared for winter. Hay was stored, preserves lined the cellar shelves, and firewood was stacked high against the coming cold. The cattle were brought in from the distant pastures, and repairs were made to all the outbuildings. One crisp October morning, Gabriel noticed Margaret struggling more than usual with her morning routine. Her hands trembled as she poured her tea, and her breathing seemed labored. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just a touch of stiffness," Margaret assured him. "The weather's changing. My joints always know it before the rest of us." But by midday, it was clear something more serious was wrong. Margaret collapsed while gathering the last of the season's herbs from her garden. Eleanor found her mother unconscious among the plants and called frantically for Gabriel. They carried Margaret inside, sending one of the ranch hands galloping for Doc Wilson. The doctor arrived 2 hours later, his examination confirming their worst fears. "She's had a stroke," he informed them gravely. "A severe one." Eleanor gripped Gabriel's hand, her face pale with shock. "Will she recover?" Doc Wilson's expression was somber. "She's strong-willed, which helps, but at her age." He left the sentence unfinished. "The next day or two will tell us more. Keep her comfortable. Talk to her even if she doesn't respond. Sometimes they can hear more than we realize." The following days were a vigil of hope and despair. Margaret remained unconscious for nearly 30 hours before finally opening her eyes. When she did, it became clear that the stroke had affected her right side significantly. Her speech was slurred and difficult to understand, and she could barely move her right arm and leg. Eleanor devoted herself to her mother's care, reading to her for hours and helping with the exercises Doc Wilson prescribed. Gabriel rearranged his work schedule to be available whenever needed, often sitting with Margaret to give Eleanor necessary rest. "You should focus on the baby," Margaret managed to say one evening, her speech improving gradually with persistent effort. "Not an old woman." "You're my mother," Eleanor replied firmly. "This baby will need his grandmother." "His?" Gabriel asked from the doorway, a tray of food in his hands. Eleanor smiled. "Or her. But Mother is convinced it's a boy." "Mother's intuition," Margaret insisted with a determined nod. By November, Margaret had regained limited movement in her affected side and could speak more clearly, though fatigue remained a constant challenge. Gabriel built a special wheeled chair that allowed her more mobility around the house, and on warmer days, he carried her to the porch so she could observe the ranch activities. Eleanor's pregnancy progressed well, her belly growing rounder as the baby developed. Despite her condition, she insisted on maintaining as many of her duties as possible, though she had temporarily relinquished her teaching position to Mrs. Holbrook again. One snowy December evening, as the three sat before the fire, Gabriel brought out a small wrapped package. "Early Christmas gift," he explained, handing it to Eleanor. She unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "I thought you might want to write about the baby," Gabriel said. "Keep a record for when he's older." Eleanor traced the initials with her finger, touched by the thoughtfulness. "It's beautiful, thank you." "There's more," Gabriel continued, producing another package for Margaret. "This one's practical, I'm afraid." Margaret unwrapped a wooden lap desk with compartments for writing implements and a special holder designed to accommodate her weakened right hand. "You mentioned wanting to write to your friends back east," Gabriel explained. "Thought this might make it easier." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You're a good man, Gabriel Vaughn," she said clearly, her speech stronger when she was emotional. "My daughter chose well." Gabriel ducked his head, uncomfortable with praise as always. "Got something else to tell you both. I've decided to build an addition to the house come spring. A proper sitting room with big windows for Margaret's chair, and a small study where Eleanor can prepare her lessons when she returns to teaching." "You've thought of everything," Eleanor said warmly. "Not everything," Gabriel admitted. "Been thinking we should properly name this place." "Every good ranch needs a name that means something." "What did you have in mind?" Eleanor asked. Gabriel looked at both women, his expression serious. "Three Hearts Ranch, because that's what built this place, the three of us together." Margaret reached for his hand with her good one, squeezing it firmly. Eleanor, too moved to speak, simply nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. As the new year of 1873 dawned, a fierce blizzard descended on Black Hawk, isolating the ranch for nearly a week. The howling winds and deep snows tested the preparations they had made, but the house remained warm, the pantry well stocked, and the animals secure in their reinforced shelters. On the third night of the storm, Eleanor woke with a gasp, her hand clutching her rounded belly. "Gabriel," she whispered urgently. "The baby, I think it's coming." Gabriel sat bolt upright, instantly alert. "Now, but it's too early." "Dr. Wilson said February." "The baby disagrees," Eleanor replied, grimacing as another contraction gripped her. Gabriel leapt from the bed, pulling on his clothes. "I'll get your mother, then I'll try to reach the doctor." "No," Eleanor caught his arm. "You can't go out in this storm, it's suicide." "But you need the doctor," Gabriel insisted, torn between protecting his wife and unborn child and facing the deadly blizzard. "We need you more," Eleanor said firmly. "Mother delivered babies in Boston before her hands worsened. She'll know what to do." Margaret, awakened and informed of the situation, took charge with surprising vigor. "Boil water," she instructed Gabriel. "Bring clean linens. And my sewing box just in case." Through the long night, as the storm raged outside, Eleanor labored to bring their child into the world. Gabriel alternated between following Margaret's instructions and holding Eleanor's hand, whispering encouragement as she fought through the pain. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her during a brief respite between contractions. "You can do this." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "Remember that when I'm cursing your name in a few minutes." As dawn approached, Eleanor's labor intensified. Margaret, despite her physical limitations, directed the delivery with calm authority. "I can see the head," she announced. "One more big push, Eleanor." With a final, tremendous effort, Eleanor delivered their child into Margaret's waiting hands. The baby's lusty cry filled the room, bringing tears to Gabriel's eyes. "A boy," Margaret declared triumphantly. "A fine, strong boy." Gabriel carefully cut the cord where Margaret indicated, then wrapped the squalling infant in a soft blanket before placing him in Eleanor's arms. The sight of his wife holding their son overwhelmed him with emotion. "He's perfect," Eleanor whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. "Look what we made, Gabriel." Gabriel sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Eleanor as they both gazed at their newborn son. "What shall we name him?" Eleanor looked at her mother, who watched from the end of the bed with tears of joy streaming down her face. "I'd like to name him Thomas after my father, Thomas Gabriel Vaughn. It's a good name, Gabriel agreed, his voice thick with emotion. A strong name for a strong boy. By the time the blizzard finally broke 3 days later, allowing Doc Wilson to reach them, young Thomas had already established himself as the center of the household. The doctor pronounced both mother and child remarkably healthy given the circumstances, crediting Margaret's skilled assistance. "You've got a real fighter here," the doctor commented, examining the robust infant. "Born in a blizzard and thriving. He'll be tough as Montana leather." Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it renewed life across the ranch. The addition to the house progressed rapidly, with Gabriel and his hands working long hours to complete it before the summer heat arrived. Margaret continued her recovery, regaining more mobility with each passing week, though she would always carry the effects of her stroke. Eleanor, recovering her strength after Thomas's birth, divided her attention between her son, her mother, and gradually resuming some of her teaching duties. The town council had agreed to a flexible arrangement that allowed her to teach 3 afternoons a week while bringing Thomas with her. "It's unconventional," the town mayor had admitted, "but then this is the frontier. We make our own conventions." One warm evening in May, as the family sat on the expanded porch watching the sunset, Gabriel placed a small wooden carving in Margaret's lap, a miniature sign reading "Three Hearts Ranch." "The big one's going up at the entrance tomorrow," he explained. "Thought you might like a keepsake version." Margaret traced the letters with her fingers, her eyes bright with emotion. "I never imagined when we boarded that train in Boston that I would find another home." She looked up at Gabriel. "Thank you for welcoming an old woman into your life." "Our lives are richer for having you in them," Gabriel replied sincerely. Eleanor, nursing Thomas in the rocking chair Gabriel had built specifically for this purpose, smiled at their exchange. "When I answered that advertisement, I hoped for security and perhaps eventual contentment," she reflected. "I never dreamed I would find such happiness." Gabriel moved to stand beside her chair, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I advertised for a wife and got a family," he said softly. "Best bargain I ever struck." As the summer of 1873 unfolded, Three Hearts Ranch flourished. Gabriel's innovative breeding program began to show results, with his cattle fetching premium prices at market. Eleanor's teaching earned recognition from the Territorial Education Office, bringing additional resources to the Black Hawk School. Margaret, though never regaining full use of her right side, became known throughout the region for her medicinal knowledge and gardening expertise. Thomas grew into a curious, active infant, adored by his parents and grandmother. His first smile, first laugh, and first attempts at crawling were celebrated events in the household. Gabriel proved to be a doting father, often carrying his son in a special sling while performing his less dangerous ranch duties. In September, as they celebrated their first harvest from the expanded garden, Eleanor had news to share. "I visited Doc Wilson yesterday," she announced as they sat down to dinner. "It seems Thomas will have a brother or sister next spring." Gabriel's face lit with joy. "Another baby! That's wonderful news," Margaret clapped her hands in delight. "I told you this house would fill with children." As they celebrated this latest blessing, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a practical arrangement, a mail-order bride with an elderly mother in tow, and a lonely rancher seeking companionship, had blossomed into something none of them could have predicted. A family bound not just by circumstance but by deep and abiding love. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to Three Hearts Ranch. Eleanor gave birth to a daughter, Margaret Rose, in April 1874, followed by another son, James, in 1876. The elder Margaret lived to see all three grandchildren grow into sturdy, intelligent youngsters, finally passing peacefully in her sleep during the winter of 1879 at the age of 70. The ranch prospered under Gabriel's stewardship, eventually expanding to over 1,000 acres. Eleanor continued teaching for many years, eventually founding a small academy that served children from across the region. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps, showing an innate understanding of the land and animals, while Margaret Rose inherited her grandmother's healing touch and knowledge of plants. James developed a talent for engineering, later designing innovative irrigation systems that transformed ranching throughout Montana Territory. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1897, as family and friends gathered to celebrate at Three Hearts Ranch, Gabriel pulled Eleanor aside for a private moment. "You ever regret answering my advertisement?" he asked, his hair now streaked with gray but his eyes still bright with love. Eleanor, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, smiled up at her husband. "Not for a single day. Every hardship, every joy, all of it was worth experiencing together. When you stepped off that train with your mother, I thought I was welcoming two women into my home," Gabriel said, taking her hands in his. "I never realized they were welcoming me into a family." "Three hearts that became one," Eleanor replied, echoing the motto that had guided them through the years. As the sun set over the prosperous ranch they had built together, Gabriel and Eleanor rejoined their children, grandchildren, and friends, their lives a testament to the unexpected ways love finds and transforms us, even in the wild and untamed lands of the American West.